Westeros is built on hierarchy. Lords command armies, knights swear fealty, and the small folk live their lives beneath layers of authority they can rarely challenge. Every relationship within this world is supposed to follow a rigid structure. Power flows downward, loyalty flows upward, and the stability of the realm depends on everyone understanding exactly where they stand. But the third episode of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms begins quietly questioning whether loyalty formed through obligation is truly as strong as loyalty formed through choice. Because when two travellers continue walking the long roads of Westeros together, not because they must, but because they choose to, something unusual begins to emerge. A relationship that does not quite fit into the rigid social order surrounding them. At first glance, the bond between Dunk and Egg appears to follow the traditional structure of knight and squire. One commands while the other obeys. The knight provides protection and guidance while the squire learns through service and observation. This structure has existed in Westeros for generations, shaping the way young boys are trained to eventually become knights themselves. But as the episode unfolds, it becomes increasingly clear that the relationship between Dunk and Egg does not fully resemble that familiar pattern. Their loyalty to one another is not rooted in birthright or sworn obligation. It grows slowly from shared experience, difficult roads, and the quiet understanding that both of them are navigating a world that does not quite accept them. This theme of loyalty becomes central to the episode's emotional core. In the courts of Westeros, loyalty is often transactional. Knights serve lords because they are sworn to them. Lords reward that service with protection, status, and land. These relationships are defined by clear expectations. But Dunk and Egg exist outside that system. Dunk is a hedge knight with no lord to serve, and Egg is a boy whose position in the world remains deliberately ambiguous. The loyalty they develop is therefore something unusual within the political culture of Westeros. It is not enforced by tradition or hierarchy. It is chosen. As their journey continues, another idea begins emerging beneath the surface of the story. The concept of identity itself becomes increasingly complicated for both characters. Dunk calls himself a knight, yet he continues questioning whether he truly deserves that title. His armour and sword signal authority, but internally he often doubts his experience and judgment. Every decision he makes carries the quiet fear that someone might eventually expose him as unworthy of the role he inherited. In many ways, Dunk is still trying to grow into the identity he claims to possess. Egg faces a similar tension, though from the opposite direction. Officially, he is only a squire, a young boy learning how to serve and assist a knight. Yet the episode repeatedly hints that his understanding of the world extends far beyond that simple role. His knowledge of noble customs, heraldry, and etiquette continues surfacing in conversations. He observes situations with a level of awareness that seems unusual for someone his age. These moments do not reveal his true identity outright, but they reinforce the idea that Egg may be more than he appears. Like Dunk, he is occupying a role while quietly becoming something else. This dual exploration of identity allows the episode to examine one of the most persistent assumptions within Westerosi society: the belief that noble birth automatically produces honourable people. Throughout the history of the realm, bloodlines and family names have been treated as indicators of virtue. A knight from a great house is expected to embody chivalry simply because of the lineage behind him. But the events of the episode continue challenging that assumption in subtle ways. Several highborn individuals encountered along the road display behaviour that contradicts the ideals traditionally associated with their status. Pride, cruelty, and indifference appear, where compassion and responsibility are supposed to exist. Meanwhile, Dunk, a man with no noble lineage and very little formal training, repeatedly demonstrates the qualities that the songs of Westeros celebrate. He acts with empathy, protects those weaker than himself, and struggles constantly to do what he believes is right. The contrast becomes difficult to ignore. Honour may be praised as a noble inheritance, but the episode suggests it is actually a personal choice. Training and mentorship therefore emerge as another important theme shaping the episode. The role of a squire is often misunderstood as a position of simple servitude. A young boy carries armour, cares for horses, and assists his knight in practical matters. But the deeper purpose of squireship is education. A squire learns how a knight thinks. He learns how to judge situations, when to show restraint, and when to act decisively. Egg is observing Dunk carefully, absorbing lessons that extend far beyond the physical duties of his position. At the same time, Dunk is discovering that mentorship carries responsibilities he never anticipated. Guiding a squire requires patience, judgment, and a willingness to think beyond one's own needs. Dunk cannot simply act according to instinct anymore. Every decision he makes now influences someone else's understanding of what knighthood should represent. Protecting Egg physically is only part of that responsibility. Dunk must also consider the example he sets through his behaviour. In doing so, he begins slowly transforming from a man pretending to be a knight into someone who genuinely embodies the role. The road itself continues serving as the stage where these lessons unfold. Travelling through the countryside reveals a side of Westeros rarely explored within grand political narratives. Villages struggle with everyday hardships. Farmers worry about harvests rather than royal politics. The concerns that dominate noble courts feel distant and abstract compared to the immediate challenges faced by ordinary people. This perspective reminds the audience how vast the realm truly is, and how unevenly power and prosperity are distributed across it. For Dunk and Egg, these encounters provide valuable insight into the responsibilities that accompany knighthood. A knight's duty is not only to serve powerful lords, it also involves protecting the small folk who rarely have the ability to defend themselves. The further they travel from the centres of power, the clearer this responsibility becomes. Dunk begins recognising that the title of knight carries meaning not because of tournaments or noble recognition, but because of the protection it offers to those without status. One of the most important changes happening during this stage of the journey is something subtle. It is not marked by a single dramatic moment or a clear declaration of growth. Instead, it appears gradually in the way Sir Duncan the Tall begins carrying himself. Earlier in the story, Dunk constantly questioned whether he deserved to call himself a knight. The armour he inherited from his mentor felt almost like borrowed authority, something he feared might be taken away if someone looked too closely at him. But during the events of this episode, something begins to shift. Dunk is no longer simply pretending to be a knight. He is beginning to behave like one. This transformation does not happen through grand victories or tournament glory. It happens through responsibility. Every step of the road now includes someone else, depending on him. Protecting Egg forces Dunk to think beyond his own survival. The choices he makes are no longer just about whether he personally avoids danger. They shape the safety and future of the boy travelling beside him. That change quietly pushes Dunk into a new level of maturity. He may still feel uncertain inside, but the world around him increasingly sees the actions of a man who takes his duties seriously. Protection becomes one of the clearest expressions of this growth. Dunk watches over Egg constantly, even during ordinary moments of travel. Whether they are approaching strangers, entering unfamiliar places, or navigating tense conversations, Dunk instinctively places himself between Egg and potential danger. It is not a calculated performance designed to prove his worth as a knight. It is a natural reaction shaped by responsibility. And that instinct reveals something important about Dunk's character. While other knights may treat their titles as symbols of status, Dunk treats his as a duty that must be lived every day. At the same time, Dunk begins making more deliberate moral decisions. Earlier in the journey, he often acted purely on instinct, responding emotionally to situations he believed were unjust. Those instincts remain strong, but they are now accompanied by a growing awareness of the consequences attached to them. Each choice he makes carries weight, not only for himself but for Egg as well. This awareness does not make Dunk more cautious in abandoning his values. Instead, it makes him more thoughtful about how he carries them out. These changes represent the early stages of Dunk becoming the kind of knight he once admired in stories. The songs he grew up hearing spoke of knights who defended the weak and acted with honour even when it was difficult. For most of his life, those ideals felt distant and almost mythical. Now Dunk is slowly discovering that living by those ideals requires patience, judgment, and the willingness to accept the risks that come with them. The road is turning those childhood stories into lived experience. While Dunk grows into his responsibilities, Egg continues, revealing qualities that make him far more capable than his age initially suggests. His intelligence remains one of the most striking aspects of his character. Egg processes situations quickly, often noticing details that Dunk overlooks. He understands how certain people should be addressed, recognizes symbols connected to noble families, and interprets conversations with surprising clarity. These observations repeatedly demonstrate that Egg has been exposed to knowledge far beyond what most children possess. But Egg's abilities are not limited to knowledge alone. He also shows emotional awareness that adds depth to his character. He understands how people feel during tense moments, and often responds with empathy or humour that help diffuse situations. This emotional intelligence allows him to interact with others in ways that feel both confident and genuine. Even when he challenges Dunk's assumptions, he does so with a tone that reflects respect rather than arrogance. These qualities begin creating an interesting reversal within their partnership. Officially, Egg is the student learning from his knight, but in practice, the flow of learning moves in both directions. Dunk teaches Egg what courage and responsibility look like when lived honestly. Egg teaches Dunk how the social and political landscape around them actually functions. Each character possesses strengths the other lacks, and their growth becomes intertwined as a result. The more time they spend together, the more their relationship begins shifting away from the strict hierarchy of knight and squire. In traditional arrangements, a squire's role is defined almost entirely by obedience. He follows instructions, performs tasks, and observes silently until he eventually earns his own knighthood. But Egg's presence within Dunk's life does not fit neatly into that mould. Their conversations often feel like exchanges between equals rather than commands from superior to subordinate. By the latter part of the episode, their dynamic resembles something closer to partnership. Dunk still carries the responsibility of protection, but Egg contributes ideas and insights that shape their decisions. When situations become complicated, they talk through them together. This collaborative approach strengthens the trust between them and gradually transforms their bond into something deeper than duty. Friendship begins replacing formality. This growing partnership highlights another important element of the world around them. Power in Westeros rarely needs to be displayed loudly to be effective. Unlike the sweeping battles and dramatic confrontations seen in other parts of the realm's history, the tensions here operate through quieter mechanisms. Words spoken in the wrong tone can create enemies. A careless insult can travel across noble networks faster than any messenger. Social pressure becomes a powerful force, shaping how people behave. Within this environment, conversations often carry consequences that extend far beyond the moment they occur. Nobles and knights constantly measure one another through subtle exchanges. Reputation spreads through observation and rumour rather than official proclamations. This means that even small interactions have the potential to reshape how someone is perceived within the larger social structure. Dunk, who still thinks about problems in straightforward moral terms, is only beginning to recognise how complicated these dynamics can become. Egg's awareness of these subtleties helps illuminate them for the audience. He understands that power is not always expressed through swords or commands. Often it moves quietly through influence and perception. Knowing who someone is connected to, how they might react to a perceived insult, or what expectations surround their status can change the entire meaning of an interaction. These insights gradually help Dunk navigate a world that once felt confusing and unpredictable. Despite this growing understanding, one reality continues looming over their journey. The consequences of Dunk's earlier confrontation with Prince Aerion have not disappeared. Distance from the original event does not erase its implications. In a society built on reputation and pride, challenges to authority are rarely forgotten. Aerion's status ensures that the memory of that conflict continues existing within the networks of power surrounding the royal family.